Test. Oh yeah, looks like we're good. Okay. I'm Phil Wyman, and this is the Wild Theology Podcast, where the world, the humans in it, and God are all wilder than we've been told.
That's your intro?
So, you'll get philosophy and theology and crazy stories that come from 30 years of pastoring,
boring,
20 years of festival work,
whatever,
and the mud and blood of wrestling with the living in the spaces angels fear to tread.
Ooh, trying to sound interesting, are we? Yeah, you think you got something to say?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the problem, dimwit.
Look, I'm a lot smarter than you think.
Yeah, you tightened your shoes this morning.
Whatever. We're Phil Wyman, and this is Wild Theology, where you get to argue with your own ideas.
And lose.
That's the point. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Phil Wyman. I am in Ramona, California, and I am with Jim Hogue. And tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about church life, maybe a little bit about Burning Man events, and the background sounds are brought to you by the crackling fire as we sit outside, smoking a couple stogies and talking about God. So, here's Jim.
Who the hell is Jim Hogue?
I don't know. He's a troublemaker of some kind.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't trust the guy.
Oh, no, he's all right.
Okay. I actually like him quite a bit. So, Jim and I met back...
Somebody's got to.
Yes, I know. That's how it feels sometimes, doesn't it? So, Jim and I met back in... I don't even know what year it was, do you? All I know is N.T. Wright was speaking at Gordon Conwell Seminary, and we met there, and we were cutting up in the...
All you savvy guys out there, get on the interwebs and find out when N.T. Wright spoke at Gordon Conwell on the Gospel of John.
Yeah.
And you'll have the date. And
that's when we met.
You won't win anything for it, but anyway.
Yeah. But it'll prove that you're smart, and you can leave a message that tells us how smart you are. So, Jim can be included in two categories of which I am very familiar. One is what we have called the nuns and duns, people who have been part of evangelical churches and have been burned by it. You been there, done that?
I started done.
I
was an atheist.
But then it changed somewhere, and you became a dun again.
I encountered God, and he was all right, you know?
Yeah.
And then I went on this journey that's been, 49 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, God stayed cool, but religion didn't always...
I never got the memo not to take it seriously.
Nice. So the other thing that Jim and I have in common is our love and affiliation with Burning Man events. So you have been to 5 Burning Man events, and Jim was part of the second art project that I designed and got a pile of friends to help build back in 2012, Theophany, and Jim is an automator, and so he was automating lights for that project. That was a brutal year. Oh my gosh.
Dustiest year on the playa ever.
Dustiest year, and you had troubled people troubling you, and I had troubled people troubling me, and then we had all the dust, and I had this sail fabric that was falling apart and tearing up the sides of the tent, and I'd have to repair it every day. I slept 22 hours in 14 days that year. It was ridiculous. So it took me 5 months to recover.
I haven't camped with professing Christians at Burning Man since. Actually.
Okay, so here we have two things. Actually, there's a third thing there that Jim and I have in common, and that is, first, we identify with having been burned by church. Second, we identify with the whole Burning Man 10 principles, and we think that Christians ought to learn how to navigate that environment and learn how to minister to people from those places. But then the third thing is that we both tend to be really comfortable around people who aren't Christians, sometimes more comfortable than people who are Christians.
And we're both massive Babylon 5 fans, too.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think you wanted to admit that, folks.
No. I totally want to admit that. I admit my nerdiness on that.
Yep, I'm the lurker from Gray 17.
Okay. Nerd alert. Nerd alert.
Nerd alert, and today I just finished Tiamat's Wrath in the Expanse series, so there.
So there, take that.
Yeah.
So, where do you want to start? You want to start with some of the story of getting burned by church and then trying to find your way back into it, and especially when I think navigating ministering to people who are the radical outsiders to Christianity, the atheists, the burners, whoever it is that looks at Christianity already says that we're a lot of trouble, and we don't want to have anything to do with them. They're holdouts from the Middle Ages or the Elizabethan times or whatever, and yet we find a way to befriend and love them and just to be Christ in the middle of that. And then how do we handle when the church doesn't understand us?
Leave. I've been surrounded in an evening midweek home group and castigated for taking an atheist to his doctor's appointment. So I left.
Yeah. For somebody who has a missional mind that says, I'm supposed to love everybody around me with the love of God. And I've actually come to hate the term love the unlovable, because the moment we think of somebody as unlovable, we have categorized them as like subhuman, I think.
That's a great point, because really, the nicest people in my life, unfortunately at this time, are basically non-Christians. They're atheists, pagans, agnostics, burners. And the thing is about loving the unlovable, you prejudice the whole thing. I don't think we're actually called to go to people who are going to hate us, or that we're going to be having rancorous arguments with all the time. That doesn't get you anywhere. But I think you find an affinity for somebody, and they become a friend. Mm. And the thing is, as you are basically doing what God is telling us to do, to be agents of reconciliation, according to 2 Corinthians 5, we also are enjoying their friendship, and they're not a project. If they come to Christ or they don't come to Christ, they're still a friend, and it's entirely up to them. We don't judge. We don't make. We get out there and represent and love people, and the Spirit does the work. The Spirit convicts of sin, not us. That's not in our pay grade. That's not in our wheelhouse. And when we try to do it, what do you get? A rancorous argument and a falling out.
Yeah,
and it's over. Great, that's like the marksman who shoots himself in the foot and asks for a gimme and shoots again with his other foot.
That's awesome.
No, actually, I've seen the evangelical approach is basically to enforce conformity, not to actually relay the gospel and to make a disciple.
Right.
So it's not a come along long thing. It's you don't conform, you got to conform. Imagine it as two different images. You have a 27-foot sailboat, mast is down, engine is flooded, and it's just drifting. And a helicopter comes out and circles the boat with a guy hanging out of the door with a megaphone criticizing the guy's seamanship, and then flies away. That's pretty much the evangelical approach.
Yeah.
But the other one comes out, and the swimmer jumps into the water and swims up to the boat and says, "Hi, I'm Jim. I'll be your rescue swimmer today. Let's fix this."
Yeah.
Yeah, what can I do to help you? And to be a friend.
Right.
And it's kind of, one guy asked me, "How do you make disciples?" And I said, well, I don't know how to make disciples, he said. I asked, do you know how to make a friend?
Right.
That's your start.
Pretty simple. So, when you were talking about that, I was reminded of an illustration that Zizek gives about Stalinism and the Soviet communism. It was not the rules that killed you. It's not the written rules that killed you. It was the unwritten rules. And he gives an illustration of supposedly you could critique and say things against the Soviet Union. It was openly stated and asked for. What brothers, do you have something to suggest that we could do better, or do you have a critique against what is happening? And of course nobody would stand up, because they could stand up and Stalin would say thank you and people would clap and the guy would disappear.
This is how you get rid of the idealists.
Yeah. So in a sense what you comment you made was it's that pressure to conform. That is the category of unwritten rules that are stated, and we go against those, and somehow we're pressed out.
Well, yeah, and I have, in terms of my experience with evangelicalism, and having been an OG Jesus freak who was not raised in the church, who actually got saved outside of the church, lived as an atheist.
OG Jesus freak,
original gangsta Jesus freak. So represent. So that's the deal. When I didn't come from I wasn't raised a Christian. So all my formative years were basically in a normal household. So I didn't end up. I never did conform as much as I wanted to. I never could. And so in 49 years, my back looks like the Iron Throne of Westeros.
You have that many swords in it, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Count.
Game of Thrones nerd alert.
Nerd alert,
for those of you who didn't get that.
Winter is coming.
No, winter is. I think it's upon us.
Yeah, it always has been.
So, what were some? Wait, you mentioned being castigated at this Bible study for taking an atheist to a doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
What did they have to castigate you about?
Well, they talked about, they knew I also went to Burning Man and talked to people, and they know I've told them that, I speak to people that you will never meet, that would never come into this church at all. You couldn't invite them; they wouldn't be here. And they said, well, how effective are you? I mean, you're not effective. I'm thinking, I'm not responsible for conversion. I don't see anywhere in the Scripture where we're directly responsible for conversion. We're directly responsible to bear witness, to actually act as an agent of reconciliation, because we were given the ministry of reconciliation, and so we appeal to people as Christ appeals to them. But to stand there and quote him John 3:16 and say you're going to hell, that just isn't biblical. I also made the mistake of taking about 3 years of master's an MDiv's program. Right. And
where at?
Melodyland School of Theology. Sounds like a daycare center, but it
sounds like something really close to Disneyland.
Well, yeah, geographically speaking and otherwise.
I know. I just had to throw that out there.
You had to throw that in there. We used to say that. They said Melodyland next to Disneyland, geographically speking.
Yeah, Melodyland, where we get your Mickey Mouse theological.
We're a pretty happy, strange kingdom over here too. So I took 4 trimesters of New Testament Greek.
Right.
And I've just had the audacity to let that actually influence my thinking all these years. So,
shame on you.
I know.
I do have to say, and so I taught Koine in Bible college back years ago, and I haven't kept up with it like I should. But I have to say, I'm pretty impressed with your Greek.
I haven't really kept up. If you guys have heard of Libronics, I've had that for years, but it's gotten so expensive, I'm running out to buy the 11-volume set of Kittle's Theological Dictionary of the New Testament because I can't afford Libronics anymore.
Yeah.
I only have to pay once for the books. But yeah, it was interesting how it all went, and Linda and I both have been together. That's another thing. As a couple, we are on the same mission and the same page. But I think the thing that I think is unfortunate, and I is that we're usually kind of on our own. There's really not a lot of people who. Well, Dallas Willard said it interesting. In modern evangelicalism, there's all kinds of emphasis on what you believe, but there's not a lot of emphasis on obedience.
Right.
Obedience comes down to just behaving yourself and trying to not sin, or at least not look like you're sinning.
Right.
And conduct has not much to do with it. If you're actually intending to serve, the conduct's not the issue. That's going to take care of itself.
Right. Right. There's an interesting thing that is happening in that Multi-Faith Matters group I'm in with John Moorhead.
Yeah.
And the discussion is about orthopathy right now. John has focused on that for quite some time, and it's interesting because we think in evangelicalism of orthodoxy first, that I believe right, and then there's our orthopraxy.
Yeah, orthopraxy. I was wondering what you meant about orthopathy.
Right,
like
and then
we're all infected with the same stuff.
No. Listen, because they're orthopathy. Yes,
okay.
Orthopraxy is our behavior, but orthopathy has to do that pathos, the feelings, the emotions, right? And there's this need that we're looking at in order to enable the evangelical Christian to identify in a positive way with their religious other neighbors, whether they're Muslim or maybe they're non-religious, they're atheist, whatever they might be, Buddhist or pagan, Hindu, Mormon, that we need to have proper feelings toward them in order to minister to them. And if we start at a place of fear, if we start at a place of an immediate bias, then we can't have this orthopathy. We were joking about bowels of mercy earlier today, but isn't that what Paul was talking about? Yes. That we felt in such a way that we desired the best for the other, and so.
Yeah, but it goes to what that guy that I took to the hospital for his appointment. The thing was, we met. These guys have actually been on NPR. They have a booth called the Coalition for Reason, and they say, have a personal relationship with reason. Can there be good without God? Yeah. And they were tearing down when I met them. Linda and I walked around the park, and just Rob and I just clicked. I mean, we all have so many common interests, and he's such a smart guy and everything. So we just became friends. And then the thing is, I do go to that booth, but the thing is, they're friends. I'm not there to argue. I'm not there to debate. And what's funny is, the booth has people talking, and these evangelicals are coming and just practically yelling at them and using all these weird arguments that they learned in some sermon, which doesn't go anywhere. They've seen them all. It doesn't occur to them. Like they're talking to objects and not people.
Right.
Whereas we're getting to know each other in the back, laughing and scratching and having a grand time. And and so, they'll say something and I'll say, that actually is a good point. And the one thing, it takes honesty also. Again, they're not a project. They're my friends. I haven't been out there in a while, so I want to go back. Because it's just fun.
So here you're hanging out with the atheists who have do you have a personal relationship with reason booth, and ethical atheism, right?
Oh, highly.
So, yeah. Well, that's a terminology that's used by a number of my friends on the East Coast.
And it's mostly that.
Right.
In fact, I find them to be far more trustworthy and ethical than a lot of professing Christians I know.
Yeah,
I'm proud of those guys.
I can say that about a lot of the pagans I know, as well as atheist friends that I have. Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely right, as well as Muslim friends that I have, and Buddhist friends.
I'm in engineering, so I've had relationships with lots of Muslims.
Yeah, of course.
And honestly, I made up a button recently. I found the Arab word for wal al-kitab, which means people of the book.
Right.
In Islam, there is a point of respect to non-Muslims who are of the same tradition as Abraham. So Jews and Christians, who in the old times when the caliphates were out, there was mostly that, well, you had to pay an extra tax because you're not a Muslim,
right.
but you were safe mostly. But in the modern days, you show up at an Islamic center and you understand that. Well, I was at another anti-Muslim thing. A former Muslim was talking about all this stuff, but he saw my button, and he saw that, and he mentioned the thing. Yeah, I know about that in the past, but nowadays, it's actually a position of respect that I both show and receive respect in that term. And he says, he smiles, and he says, "You identify." I said, "Exactly." Al-Kitab.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful.
So that opens doors. We're busy slamming doors. I'm kicking them open.
Wow. So it's been difficult to find friends in evangelical Christian churches.
Yeah.
Who identify with this kind of way of doing things.
Yeah, it has. Well, the thing is that, again, what I'm doing and what people like me do, first of all, is trouble because I'm a layman. I'm not supposed to have any opinions. I'm not supposed to actually... I even found an old letter I wrote to one church in town here that I went to years ago.
Right.
And I was cleaning off hard drives and finding all this stuff, and I found this letter where I took exception to their doctrinal statement on their eschatology and other things, basic dispensationalism. And the thing is, like say, I'm the striped unicorn. I'm the weird one who, oh my gosh, he still remembers his Greek. I gave that up as soon as I got a C in the class.
Right.
You know, so. Like I said, I never got the memo that it didn't matter. So I'm full throttle.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's move to thoughts about Christians showing up at places like Burning Man.
Okay.
And in a lot of ways that kind of fits the, I thought for a second. Let me back up a bit. So you're hanging out with your atheist friends at this booth, and they know that you're a Christian, right?
Oh yeah.
So what does that look like when that comes up as a topic and you're talking to the ethical atheists?
Well, we actually started the first time I was there, and I said I had to establish honesty. They know I believe this stuff, and they know I was an atheist. So, and I'm not there. They're not a project. They're friends, and I want to know them. So the first thing is get to know them, their interests, and all that kind of stuff. Be friends, make friends. It's just like friend making time. But when we began to talk issues, Rob already knew me, so he introduced me to every one of them. And one of our common things is we both read Flavius Josephus. So, like, Rob is extremely well read.
Wow.
But
that's serious reading. It's a long book.
Rob is
a thick volume with tiny font.
Rob is brilliant. And so I sat down and I said, I just want to establish, first of all, right out the gate, that I could be wrong.
Right.
I don't think that I am, but I'd be very dishonest if I came in front of you and said, it's, that I don't think I could be wrong. It's always there. The doors flung wide open and we could talk about anything. And they were asking questions. We weren't trading arguments. We were actually asking questions of each other.
Wow.
And then finding common interests.
The valuable thing about that is that as long as you stay in the argument phase, we're looking for the answer for the other, and the other is looking for an answer to us. And we're not thinking with an openness that says, well, I have some legitimate questions about where you stand, or maybe about how you think about what I believe, or maybe even about what I believe. once we hit the question phase where we actually ask questions of one another, that's where our worldviews change. And quite frankly, I want the radical other, the Muslim, the pagan, the atheist, I want them to change my thinking, because there are probably things about my cultural Christianity, not my basic and fundamental beliefs, and I wish I could save that word fundamentalism from its terrible meaning today, to just going back to the basics and the simple things, right? That would be fantastic.
I keep thinking about Orwell and destruction of words. They can really destroy some good words.
Absolutely. His discussion of that is a fantastic little paper. But
double plus good.
Yeah. But so when I think of it in that way, they begin to ask questions. They're challenging me about my faith, and I can see how some elements of the culture of my Christianity actually are not healthy in respect to how it relates to the rest of culture in any kind of evangelical or redemptive way. And I love it when I get challenged like that. It helps me, in a sense, deconstruct what should be deconstructed in order to maintain what I should maintain.
And you learn 4 words that really are good in that time. That's a good point.
Yeah, or I don't know. Those 3 words are great too.
Can you pause that for a minute? No, don't pause it yet, because the fire's going down. I think the heretic's getting away. Hang on.
Okay, we're back.
We're back.
Yeah, and the fire is stoked a little higher, and the bottom of the heretic's feet are just a little warmer once again.
Yep, they gave him a nice salt rub before he stuck him in there. It'll come out pretty good.
Yeah, we burn and eat our own, don't we?
Bad flashbacks.
So I was kind of segueing toward Burning Man, but then I went back to this thought about hanging out with atheist friends and what happens when you're there. But it was because I think there's a similarity, because in some sense people are asking us, or not in some sense, all the time, people, how can you go to Burning Man? And how do you relate to those people? And what are you doing there? And whatever else. We're automatically, there's an assumption of the terminology I like to use about it. It's not that there's a critique that is skeptical. It's no longer a skepticism that they have, but there's an assumption of an obscenity about the other. So oftentimes when we relate to this radical other, and particularly when we're going to a place like Burning Man, they're not just skeptical, they're assuming obscenity.
Assuming obscenity?
Obscenity.
Obscenity. How? What? I don't. I'm not following.
There's obscene things that go on there. You must be involved with them.
Oh, there's nothing beats that shit.
Yeah.
Really, no. It comes down to, it's interesting because when you go to some place like that, now that is a culture it's a counterculture or a different culture that you really can't make assumptions about. If you're going to do any good there, the first thing you have to do is go there with your eyes open and watch, see. And it's funny what I found about.
Well, what do you see at Burning Man? I mean, you must be looking at all kinds of things there, Mr. Hogue.
Let me tell you, a lot of nudity you see at Burning Man is not pleasant. Grandpa, no! Yeah, it's not. The thing about it is, you don't see very much of that. I've also noticed that the toplessness stops abruptly when it gets really hot. It's like one day, and then but so
really hot and then really cold at night.
Yeah,
we got 2 edges of that. So yes, absolutely.
So when it comes down to it, what they really value and what they long for is what really got me. And we've been at Pagan Bunny Burn, this last thing we went to just a week ago. Right,
it's a regional burn in the Sacramento area, is that correct?
No, Elk Creek, way up north, almost to Redding.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, beyond Chico.
Okay.
So that's, we sat with a guy that I know at Burning Man, and we got to talk about, issues of faith. He had a Catholic background. There was a lot of things he didn't understand, and we were able to give him. We were able to talk a conversation that you could never force on anybody. And also a forced conversation. Nobody ever walks away from a forced conversation saying that was a good time. It's more like, I'll never do that again.
Right.
So,
well, one of the things that scares me about the way many evangelical Christians look at ministering to others is that it's kind of like a pastor giving a sermon at church. And then he talks about how wonderful it went today. I taught about this, I said this was wonderful. It reminds me of a metal guitarist turning around to his amp to get feedback. And so the sound coming from the amp reverberates on the strings, and you get that stuff we call feedback. It just screams. Some people have gotten good at controlling it, but in a sense, that's what we're doing. We're feeding off of our own noise to determine what is good, as opposed to actually listening to the other in that place, like the bluegrass musicians who stand in a circle and look at each other and trade off licks, or the jazz musician. They really listen to one another and they trade off these licks. I mean, that is amazing stuff, and that's the place we ought to be. In hearing the other, we know how they're responding, and we know more what's going on, and what you're talking about is that kind of thing.
Well, I used to fly all over the country and teach automation classes, engineering classes. People would come in and say, well, how's the class going? They'd say it to me right in front of the class. Is ask them. I'm not the judge of this.
Yeah.
They're the ones who have to sit through this.
What makes me so happy about hearing that is you automatically get that because you know it in work life, but then you also see it and you attach that to the church.
Yeah. See, in these 49 years, I've actually had opportunity to teach from a pulpit occasionally, until they caught me and ran me off. But in that time, my focus was, am I giving them anything useful? We're all practitioners here. So if I'm going to stand in front of them, I better hand the community something they can actually use. And so I worked pretty hard on those things, and actually incorporated video from The Matrix and from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe about equipping. And it was really good. Favorite part is when I finished the clip from Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Lucy turns around and said, told you he was real. It was perfect. And then went back into what we were doing. So I had Neo closing actions on automatic weapons to told you he was real.
Right.
But the thing was that it was trying to give illustrations that would make sense, that you can actually grab and use, that God can give you, and you can develop in your practice, things like that. But practitioners is important. On Facebook, I don't put myself down as evangelical Christian or mention my church. I've noticed that in my travels, a lot of people have a lot to say about church and nothing to say about Christ. And that was shocking. I mean, it's everywhere, from the north to the mid-south, to the deep south, to Texas, to the Midwest, everywhere, in California.
Right.
And so...
would you say that line again? Everybody has something to say about...
Oh, everybody has a lot to say about their church or their pastor, but nothing about Christ and nothing about personal experience that they own in being a disciple. So on my Facebook page, I list religion as practitioner in the Messianic arts.
Oh, you're such a troublemaker. Okay, so I'm going to close with that thought. And hey, this is Jim Hogue. You've gotten the crackling fire and the sounds of the night in Ramona.
My cigar went out.
And his cigar went out. So we're going to give him an opportunity to relight it and say goodbye. And thanks for hanging out with us. Thank you to my patrons who help make these missional travels and these podcasts possible. Without you, I couldn't do it. God bless you. If you'd like to support this project, you can do so here on Patreon for as little as $1 a release, and at the most, that's $4 a month.
Why on earth would anybody want to support us?
Well, I think we're pretty cool, and maybe some people believe in what we're doing.
Oh, come on, you believe that?
Yeah.
Don't you ever think you're just a little too weird for the average person?
Yeah, sometimes.